The battlefield of Kurukshetra stretched endlessly under the blazing sun, its vast plains shimmering like a molten sea of anticipation. Dust swirled in the dry air as the earth itself seemed to tremble, knowing the war of all wars was about to begin. On one side stood the mighty Kaurava army, their banners fluttering proudly, the rhythmic beat of war drums thundering in the distance. On the other side, the Pandavas, righteous yet restless, their warriors tightening the grips on their bows and swords, their eyes fixed on destiny. The silence before the clash was suffocating. Men whispered prayers under their breath, horses pawed the earth, elephants trumpeted nervously, and the metallic clang of armor echoed in rhythm with pounding hearts. Everyone knew the moment was near. In the middle of this tension stood Arjuna, son of Pandu, greatest archer of his time, his Gandiva bow resting in his hand like a serpent waiting to strike. His heart, however, was restless. He gazed across the battlefield. The enemy lines filled with faces he knew too well, teachers, cousins, elders, and friends. This was no ordinary war. This was Dharma Yuddha, a war for righteousness, and yet the price felt unbearably high. At his side, holding the reins of the white horses, sat Krishna, his friend, his guide, and yet, far beyond mortal understanding, the Supreme Being himself. Calm, radiant, and composed, Krishna sat as Achyuta, the one who never falls, the eternal protector of truth. His mere presence was a shield against despair, but Arjuna's heart demanded clarity. He needed to see, he needed to know, he needed to face the truth with his own eyes. Arjuna turned to Krishna, his voice trembling, yet firm. O Achyuta, between the two armies, draw up my chariot. I must behold those who stand here, eager to fight. I must see with whom I must contend before this great battle begins. The words hung in the air, slicing through the silence of Kurukshetra like the first crack of thunder before a storm. Krishna's lips curved into a calm, knowing smile. Without hesitation, he flicked the reins of the magnificent white horses, their manes glistening like streams of silver under the harsh sun. The chariot moved forward, wheels grinding against the dusty earth, slicing through the stillness of waiting armies. The sight of Krishna and Arjuna's golden chariot advancing to the center drew every eye. Warriors paused, whispers ran through the ranks, and even the restless beasts grew silent, for in that chariot resided two forces, man and God, hero and guide, seeker and truth. The chariot itself gleamed like a sun-lit jewel. The emblem of Hanuman fluttered on its banner, fierce and protective, roaring against the winds as though declaring the presence of divine power. The sound of the chariot's wheels was not just metal against stone, it was the sound of fate being written. As the chariot moved, Arjuna's eyes sharpened. He wanted to see the enemy lines, not from afar, but close, face to face. He wanted to burn into his mind the reality of those who stood against him, those he must defeat if righteousness was to prevail. But deep within, an unease stirred. Would he find strength or sorrow when he saw who stood there? He did not know yet. But the first duty of a warrior was clear: know your enemy. And Arjuna, a warrior above all, demanded this clarity. Krishna guided the chariot with grace, each movement calm, precise, divine. The white horses neighed and pulled, the golden dust rose like smoke, and the Pandava chariot stopped exactly in the heart of the battlefield, between two oceans of soldiers, between two worlds, between past bonds and future destiny. Arjuna rose slightly in his chariot, his eyes scanning the field before him, and what he saw pierced his heart like arrows sharper than any weapon. The enemy was not faceless. The Kaurava army was not just soldiers in armor, it was family, mentors, and friends. There stood Bhishma, the grand patriarch, his face stern yet sorrowful. There stood Drona, his beloved teacher, the man who had guided his hand to master the very bow he now carried. There stood cousins he had grown up with, elders who had once blessed him, comrades he had laughed with. Arjuna's breath caught in his throat. These were not mere enemies, these were his own blood. Men who had once held him as a child, men who had trained him, men who had fought beside him in battles past. And yet, here they stood, weapons raised, eyes burning with determination, ready to strike him down. The weight of what lay ahead crushed him. Could he raise his bow against Bhishma? Could he send arrows flying at Drona? Could he kill those he once bowed before with reverence? The questions began to burn his soul, even before the first arrow of war was fired. Krishna remained silent, his gaze calm, his presence unshaken. He knew what stirred in Arjuna's heart. He knew this was not just a physical war, it was a war of the spirit, a war within the soul. And in this silence, he let Arjuna feel, let him see, let him confront the truth without intervention. Arjuna's eyes darted from one face to another, his heart heavy, his spirit trembling. He had asked to see the enemy, but what he saw was his own reflection in them. Arjuna's voice quivered, but his words echoed with sincerity as he addressed Krishna once more. "Oh, Achyuta, you are my refuge. You are the one who never falls. You protect all who surrender to you. You hold the wisdom of the ages. And yet, I, your devotee, your friend, your student, am lost. I asked you to bring me here so I may see, and now I see too much. What am I to do?" The word Achyuta rang through the battlefield like a sacred mantra. For Krishna was not just a charioteer. He was not just a friend. He was the eternal protector, the unshakable truth, the supreme who never slips from the path of dharma. To call him Achyuta was to acknowledge his divinity, his role as guide not only to Arjuna but to all who seek truth. Krishna did not answer with words yet. His silence was his teaching. Sometimes the greatest wisdom comes not from immediate answers but from the space in which questions grow. Arjuna needed to wrestle with his heart, to feel the full weight of his dilemma before the wisdom of Krishna could enter. The chariot stood still, the horses restless but contained, the banner of Hanuman fluttering wildly as though anticipating the coming storm. And in that silence, Arjuna's inner storm raged louder than the armies around him. The practice of a first-rate warrior was always to know his enemy, to study their strengths, to face them with steady resolve, and Arjuna was indeed a warrior of the highest order. But today, his warrior's gaze blurred with the tears of a son, a student, a cousin, a friend. The Kauravas stood armed, eager, ready. Yet, in Arjuna's heart, each of them was more than an enemy. They were memories, bonds, fragments of his life. He had trained beside them, laughed with them, bowed before them. Could dharma demand their death at his hands? Could righteousness be built on the ashes of love? This was the storm of Arjuna's soul. The battlefield was not just Kurukshetra, it was his heart itself. A battlefield where duty clashed with love, where righteousness collided with sorrow, where clarity was clouded by compassion. He gripped his Gandiva bow tightly, the wood creaking under the strain of his hands. His arms were steady, but his heart trembled. For the first time in his life, the invincible Arjuna felt powerless. Krishna, Achyuta, watched in silence. The time would come for his voice, for his eternal words. But first, Arjuna had to reach the breaking point of his soul to truly see the battle not only around him but within him. The golden chariot stood still, a silent witness between two oceans of men, between two destinies. On one side, the Kauravas burning with ambition and pride. On the other, the Pandavas fighting for justice and dharma. And between them, Arjuna, torn apart, his heart a storm of duty and despair. "Draw up my chariot," he had said. And so Krishna did. But what Arjuna faced was far more than enemy soldiers. It was the truth of his existence, that dharma demanded sacrifice, that righteousness sometimes walked hand in hand with sorrow, that war, when it is for justice, is not fought without breaking hearts. The white horses pawed the ground impatiently, their breath steaming in the hot air. The banner of Hanuman whipped against the wind, as though roaring in courage for the hesitant warrior below. And Krishna, calm, eternal, sat steady, holding the reins of both the chariot and destiny itself. The silence grew heavy, thicker than the dust of the battlefield. Arjuna's voice faltered, his strength wavered, his heart pleaded, and Krishna waited, knowing that in this crucible of despair, the seed of eternal wisdom would be sown. The battle of Kurukshetra was about to begin, but the true war, the war of the soul, had already started within Arjuna. And it was this war, this inner storm, that would give birth to the timeless dialogue of the Bhagavad Gita.